we're not allowed to have heroin. And that's because most people can't handle it. Only doctors can give you heroin. Such is Alex Jones' podcast, InfoWars. Most people simply can't handle it. It is far too dangerous, far too inflammatory, far too truth adjacent to be safe for the general population. And that's why YouTube took it off. Could you imagine if YouTube was a store like Walmart and you could go in and buy heroin? Now, a lot of you are saying, but hey, Maya, you can go to Walmart and buy guns and then you can use those guns to kill a bunch of people. That's true. YouTube does have a right to say, we are not selling you any Alex Jones today. Please go to the street corner or some dark, dank alley and get it for yourself, which is where we have to go now. We have to go to... I'm not going to tell you where to go to get you some Alex Jones. When YouTube first banned Alex Jones, I was actually kind of upset because I really like listening to Alex Jones. He's crazy. He's so entertaining, but he's completely insane. He'll just literally say anything. And sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. But the way he says it, the cadence, the way he speaks with such certainty and blah, blah, blah. He's a showman. I can't say it any other way. He is so entertaining to watch. And he has something that most people simply do not have. A sort of special quality. You gotta get out of here. Now, I watch and listen to him all the time. I think most of what he says is nonsense. Every once in a while, what he's saying is true. But for the most part, he's really reaching. He tells a lot of tall tales. And what you see on Joe Rogan is not the real Alex Jones. That is Alex Jones on his absolute best behavior. Alex Jones is normally a snarling, raving lunatic screaming about conspiracy theories that have very little truth to them. But it's great. It's like listening to someone tell a bunch of tall tales. And it's funny. It's funny until he says things like, Sandy Hook is a hoax. And then people start to threaten those poor dead children's parents. And then it's not funny anymore. It's not funny when it comes off the screen. It's not funny when people go to pizza places and try to shoot them up because he's convinced them that there are pedophiles in the basement when there's no basement to begin with. And then, of course, there's the constant anti-Muslim stuff. I wasn't really familiar with this until my friend told me about a video he'd seen online of these no-go zones. This gentleman by the name of Josh Owens, who is a former employee of Alex Jones, explained how they got that footage of the Muslim no-go zones. They went to private property, a private compound, tried to trespass, and they were stopped, as they should have been stopped. And so InfoWars edited it to seem as though there were these Muslim strongholds in the middle of America, when that's simply not true. A friend of mine tried to tell me about these Muslim no-go zones. And I thought that was kind of weird because my friend is an agoraphobic and these Muslim no-go zones are outside of his house. So I'm like, what do you know about anything outside the house? Your area of expertise are things that go on inside the house. What do you know about these no-go zones? Turns out they don't exist. This is what is commonly referred to as private property, which we are allowed in America. This Josh Owens eventually quit InfoWars because he was sitting next to a little Muslim girl on a plane and he felt so much guilt about what he'd done and the fear mongering that he had done that he quit the show and took a massive salary cut. I think it's so funny that Alex Jones came out as an anti-establishment individual. He came out initially as anti-authoritarian, anti-Illuminati, anti-oligarch. He came out with Bohemian Grove. He really came out swinging against the powers that be. And that's really where he lived best, going against the grain, against authority. And then when Trump came in, that was his boy. He still somehow had to be anti-authority while still being pro-authority. And you could really see him floundering in that role because he called himself the resistance. What are you resisting? And he has to sort of do all these mental gymnastics to say that even though Trump is in power, he's still not in power and we are still the resistance we've always been. And you can hear in some of the phone calls his followers being like, what? It's the Dems and the deep state and the Satanists. They don't want you to see the truth. All the while selling his various vitamin supplements. I'm not going to hate on him for selling his vitamin supplements. He's selling vitamins. CNN is selling Sandals Resort. You're all sellouts. whatever. But he does stop every once in a while to sell his vitamins and his dick pills and his emergency meal kits, which will be useful in the event of an apocalypse, the same apocalypse he's been warning about for 20 years. That's all well and good. Now, why am I saying this about Alex Jones? I'm saying this because I used to be a huge fan. When he was talking about the Bush administration and all of the stuff that they had done, all of the lies they had told to get us into Iraq, it resonated with me. I knew that to be true. I knew that the Bush administration had told those lies. Okay, then what's the next step? The next step is what happened on 9/11 to get us into this war. Okay, now that you got me with the lies, which I know to be true, now can you sell me on something else? Can you sell me on 9/11? And yeah, he did for a while. He was able to sell me on 9/11 for a while. And I sort of was willing to believe that anything could have gone down there. We still don't know what happened in 9/11. Now, fortunately, Matt Taibbi kind of pulled me back, and I read his article in Rolling Stone, and I was like, okay, so maybe something so nefarious did not go on. But then that Epstein thing happened, and I was like, I knew it. I knew it all along. Matt Taibbi, you're full of it. Alex Jones was right. It's all a conspiracy, and they're all lizard people. They're not all lizard people. But my point is, it's not hard to get sucked into what Alex Jones is saying, because he does trickle in a little bit of truth here and there. There is some truth.
You think I am like shocked by it, so I'm up here bashing it because I don't like gay people? I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
They are. That's not true. They're not turning the frogs gay on purpose, but there are chemicals being put in the water that is affecting the gender of the frogs. Here's a clip from Democracy Now! Showing what actually happened.
They asked him to study their product, atrazine, a pesticide that is applied to more than half the corn crops in the United States and widely used on golf courses and Christmas tree farms.
Professor Hayes, talk about exactly what you found. What were the abnormalities you found in frogs, the gender-bending nature of this drug, atrazine?
Eventually, we found that not only were these males demasculinized or chemically castrated, but they also were starting to develop ovaries or starting to develop eggs. And eventually, we discovered that these males didn't breed properly, that some of the males actually completely turned into females. So we had genetic males that were laying eggs and reproducing as females. And now we're starting to show that some of these males actually show, I guess, what we'd call homosexual behavior. They actually prefer to mate with other males.
I don't know how nefarious this is. This is capitalism doing what capitalism does and poisoning us for profit. Is it a massive conspiracy? Well, actually what's happening is worse than what Alex Jones said.
And eventually it even led to things like threats of violence. Tim Pasteur, for example, before I would give a talk, would literally threaten, whisper in my ear that he could have me lynched, or he would said he would send some of his good old boys to show me what it's like to be gay, or at one point he threatened my wife and my daughter with sexual violence.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
So by the mainstream media denying what is really happening, they open a path for Alex Jones to come in and spew what he's going to spew, give a little bit of the truth, plus some embellishments. And now look, he's the only one telling anybody any truth. A lot of the stuff that he says, he just makes it up completely. In October, Alex claimed that his dying grandfather gave him his blessing, and now he was able to see things for generations in his family. Now, luckily, his grandfather did not die then. He was able to recover, and many decades later, Obama had the grandfather killed. I don't buy it. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. So you're getting the family blessing, and all of a sudden you're imparted with this knowledge that there is no natural explanation for, something supernatural, like a soap opera. And then a few seasons later, Obama, who I assume is much, much younger than your grandfather, has your grandfather killed? What are the chances? You think this is empire? You think we're falling for this? Alex, Obama did not have your grandfather killed. It didn't happen. I am not in with the CIA. I do not have firsthand knowledge, but if anyone can prove to me that Barack Obama had Alex Jones' grandpa killed, I will give you a $50 gift certificate to Outback Steakhouse. You put it in the comments, I will send you that gift certificate. You can take your girl out to eat. It didn't happen. Alex also claimed that 6 years ago, so this would be 2014, there was a massive flu and the hospitals were just overflowing with bodies. That's funny, because I was here 6 years ago and there was not a massive flu and the hospitals were not being overloaded with bodies. He was just trying to distract from the failed coronavirus response. No, there's no equivalency between anything that happened under Obama and COVID. I'm sorry, there just isn't. He's trying to sell us this because he doesn't want us to see that his boy failed the COVID response. As entertaining as Alex Jones is, it is probably for the best that he is not on the air because he's probably the Antichrist. That's right. Alex Jones is the Antichrist, and I have evidence for it. Just hold on. Now, prior to the election, I thought Alex Jones was, yes, dangerous, but more funny than dangerous. And people just maybe needed to chill out a little bit. Yes, he's screaming bloody murder in front of a flaming background. But does this necessarily make him the Antichrist? Anybody could be doing that. It doesn't mean he's a bad person. I mean, I'm not. But I got a candle back there. Does that make me the Antichrist? No, you will see. It is different. But after the election, I really had to think, is Alex Jones the Antichrist? Well, he has been asking his followers to start an armed insurrection against the democratically elected president.
Massive election fraud has been proven. Hundreds of thousands of people that are dead have been voting. It's just massive evidence. Communist Chinese and their attempt to steal our government and our country. America is fighting for its life. You're not going to let them steal this. We're not going to let them steal it in Georgia. We're not going to let them steal it in Pennsylvania. And this country's being captured by the globalists and the Chi-Coms that own Biden. Burn in hell, Joe Biden!
Pretty Antichrist stuff if you ask me. He has been spreading rumors that his brother-in-law saw with his own eyes someone stuffing the ballot box with 50 pro-Biden votes. Now, his brother-in-law did not go on film. His brother-in-law left an audio message. This was not evaluated by the authorities, which would be the bare minimum. I'm sure if that had been evaluated by the authorities, it would be all over CNN and BBC. And so Alex says that his brother-in-law witnessed it, and he played a testimonial by a man who said these things. Do we know who this man is? Do we know if this is true? I'm going to call some bullshit on this brother-in-law thing, just like I'm going to call some bullshit on his grandfather being killed by Obama. I just think it's nonsense. I was actually just talking to a friend. Is the demon stuff new or is it old? I remember that back in the Bohemian Grove days, there was a sort of undercurrent of demonic Luciferian Illuminati that all sort of went together. But right now it has been ratcheted up. He genuinely accuses people who don't agree with him, the DNC, of being Satanists. The deep state of consisting of Luciferians. Which, who is a Luciferian? I will prove that Alex Jones himself is a Luciferian. That is right. I have hard evidence for it. It's not just Alex trying to undermine the democratic process. It's not just him calling his followers to die in a war that he's about to start. It's not just him threatening to eat his neighbor.
I will eat my neighbors.
I think Alex Jones is the Antichrist because he said he's the Antichrist. In Alex in Wonderland, reporter John Ronson, who went with Alex initially to Bohemian Grove, exposes what kind of past Alex Jones actually had.
Quote, "He used to run through the halls saying he was the devil. This is no joke." And he spoke a lot about being Satan or the Antichrist. And he would walk the halls with his arms flared out and with this intense, wide-eyed, evil look in his eyes. And he proclaimed to be the Antichrist.
Well, he could make his tongue turn black. And he would roll his eyes back in his head, and he would just sort of shake his head. It was, I don't even know how to describe it. It was so eerie.
He terrorized that high school, just run full steam and shove his head into the lockers and scream, "Hail Satan!"
Who says that? Unless you're the Antichrist. No normal person says that. You have to be possessed in some way or another to say that. That is not normal. Yes, it could be somebody who wants attention. Yes, it could be an ignorant young boy just screaming so that people would look at him because he's got very little else to offer. Or maybe it's the Antichrist. He is acting like the Antichrist. He's giving you little bits of truth sprinkled in with lies and calls to action that will undermine order and bring about chaos. Who wants to undermine order and bring about chaos?
Could it be Satan?
Satan. It's Satan. Now, also in this story, John Ronson talks to people who knew him back then, including a boy he beat nearly to death in the middle of class. And when that boy was in the hospital, Alex's dad gave his parents a book on why it's wrong to sue people. Unfortunately, this man who did get beaten up still thinks that what Alex Jones has to say might have a bit of truth to it, that maybe Obama is this evil. Like, what does he have to do to you before you doubt what he says? Does he really have to kill you? Are you going to be on the other side being like, well, he killed me, but he does make a point about the Obamas? Publicly, Alex Jones says that he left that town because he exposed corruption by the police. It's not true. It didn't happen. What really happened is he got his comeuppance at a high school party, and it embarrassed him, and he realized he didn't have a future in that town anymore, so he left with his tail between his legs. But not before going through the hallways screaming that he was the Antichrist. Now, I tend to take a person at their word. If he says he's the Antichrist and he acts like the Antichrist, maybe he's the Antichrist. That's not me. That's Alex. When was he lying? Then or now? I understand why YouTube took Alex Jones off. I understand why they don't feel that they can be responsible for what this man has to say when he's urging an insurrection against the government from his armed followers. I think you should have to pass a test before you watch Alex Jones. I think you should have to pass an IQ test. I think you should have to pass a bullshit test. They try to sell you on flat earth, and if you go for it, you don't get to watch Alex Jones. But if you're like, nah, the earth is round, okay, come on in. You can watch some Alex Jones. You get it. This is a joke. But for the most part, if I were YouTube, I wouldn't let him on either. Now, that's not to say I'm not going to go hate watch Alex Jones after this, because of course I am. I do it at least once a week just to catch up, just to see what the devil's up to. And do I believe that he believes what he's saying? No, I don't think he believes what he's saying. But I do think that he knows what his words can do and that they can spur people to action. Alex, how many supplements do you have to sell before you can walk away from this? How much money do you need before you just call it a day and retire? You made a name for yourself. You did great. You may not have brought upon the apocalypse as was your Antichrist goal, but you gave it a go. You gave it the old college try. Good on you. It's time to retire now. Wait for another generation to incarnate in another form and see if you can make it work again.
You think Christ would eat somebody? He would never do that. I will. I'll barbecue your ass flat.
Subscribe.